So, I guess all of you are already familiar about ratio and proportion because if I'm not mistaken, you have encountered this topic before. Well. Bakit nga ba well? It's because I'm hoping that that all is well. Ika nga sa isang pelikula, di ba? When all is well is being mentioned, so may extraordinaryong nangyayari. So sana ganun din yung mangyari sa atin. Every time we are saying all is well, so meron din extraordinaryong mangyari. It's either matuto tayo bigla in math, or pwede ring yung pandemic na nararanasan natin ngayon ay mag-disappear right away. So hopefully, ganun yung mangyari every time we are saying all is well. So today, we are going to continue our discussion for the third grading period. So, we're done about the chapter on quadrilaterals. So we are now going to enter another chapter of our discussion, which is about the chapter on similarity. So, ano ba yung mga kailangan natin pag-aralan about similarity? So papasok dito yung wherein we're going back to the figure na tinatawag nating triangle. So, and other things that we can apply about similarity. So ano ba yung next lesson natin, which is basically now our lesson number 7. So lesson number 7 natin, in preparation for us to understand on how are we going to answer the different examples that we are going to encounter in this chapter, we are going to discuss first as lesson number 7, na tinatawag nating ratio and proportion. So, I guess all of you are already familiar about ratio and proportion because if I'm not mistaken, you have encountered this topic before. So we are just here going to recall it so that we can remember it also, because this concept that we can get here are the things that we can make use in order for us to answer problems which involves about similarity. So ano pang hinihintay natin? Let's start it now. So, unahin natin yung defining first what is ratio. So we define ratio as a comparison between two quantities. A comparison between two quantities. And usually, pag sinabi nating ratio, we are pertaining to the operation division. Or the best example of a ratio is a fraction, because we are there comparing two quantities. Let's take, for example, we do have here A over B. That A over B is written in fraction. Ibig sabihin, if you have seen a fraction, meaning to say, you are pertaining to a ratio. Or it can be written in A colon B. A colon B, yun yung medyo, when you encounter the discussion about ratio, yun yung alam natin that if you are going to write ratio, you can write it in A colon B, which can be read as A is to B. But it can also be written in fraction form. So again, ratio can be written in two different ways. You can write it in fraction form, and we can write it in colon form. Just like yung pangalawa natin, which can be read as A is to B. So every time we are seeing a fraction, that means we are pertaining to ratio. So aside from ratio, ano naman yung proportion? So this time proportion, lagi siyang magkasama, it's because proportion involves ratio. So when we define proportion, sinabi dito, proportion is an expression of equality between two ratios. Expression of equality between two ratios. So it involves two ratios. So it's an equation. So expression of equality involving two ratio. So, paano yun? So, to come up with a proportion, parang ganito. If you do have A over B and C over D, and if you're going to equate them, you are going to form a proportion. An equation of equality between two ratios. Or it can be written in column form as A is to B is equal to C is to D. But not only that, it's not that when we do have an expression na two ratios, equation involving two ratios, matatawag na agad natin proportion. At sinabi natin proportion, ito yung dalawang ratios which are equal. Two ratios which are equal. Hindi man sila magkapares ng numerator or denominator o yung mga unang number when we write it in column form o yung pangalawa, still, when you simplify it using a concept on simplifying fraction, so you will say that they are equal. So ganun dapat yung proportion. So it's not like na kapag meron kang dalawang ratio, equate mo, proportion na kaagad. So magiging proportion yon if the two ratios that you are equating are equal. So we can prove it by simply getting the simplified form of a given ratio. So that you'll find out na the two ratios are really equal for us to say that they are proportion. So since we are pertaining to proportion, there is what we call fundamental law of proportion. This law is what we are going to use every time we are encountering problems which involves proportion. So all we have to do is to apply the what we call fundamental law of proportion. Ano ba yung sinasabi doon? Sa fundamental law of proportion states that the product of the means is equal to the product of the extremes. Again, the product of the means is equal to the product of the extremes. What is means and extremes that we are pertaining to there? So let's have this example. So we do have here a given proportion which is written in column form. We do have here A is to B is equal to C is to D because when it is written in that way, we can easily determine yung tinatawag nating means and extremes. So what are the means there? So that two quantities, when we write it in column form, the two quantities inside, those are what we call as the means. While the two quantities outside, yun naman yung tinatawag natin as the extremes. So, so with the application of the fundamental law of proportion, wherein it stated that the product of the means is equal to the product of the extremes. So even if you apply the fundamental law of proportion, still the two ratios will become equal. So let's say, for example, we do have a given variable, we do have a given value there, and you are asked for a given the exact value of that variable. So you can make use of the fundamental law of proportion in order for you to find out for the value of that variable. Because even if you apply the fundamental law of proportion, na at first dapat equal yung dalawang ratio na yon, so even if you apply it, still the two ratios are equal. That is with the use of the fundamental law of proportion. And usually, we are using that fundamental law of proportion when we are solving for the unknown variable when there is a given proportion. So always remember that the fundamental law of proportion states that the product of the means is equal to the product of the extremes. So aside from fundamental law of proportion that we can use, there are also different properties that we can use involving proportion in solving about proportion. So these are the properties on proportion. So ano-ano ba yung mga properties na pwede nating magamit? Una, so if A over B is equal to C over D, let's say for example, yan yung given natin. If A over B is equal to C over D, and the first property on proportion is what we call as the cross multiplication. So again, if A over B is equal to C over D, then AD is equal to BC. Saan yun? So from here, if A over B is equal to C over D, when you apply cross multiplication, it will come up with AD, that's A times D, that's AD is equal to BC. That's another way in order for us to find the unknown in a given proportion. So let's say if we are asked to find for the measure of or for the value of a certain variable in a given proportion, all you have to do is to apply also cross multiplication. So applying cross multiplication is the same way that we are applying the fundamental law of proportion. So, parang ganun din na-apply natin. Ano ba yung AD na yan? Pag sinulat natin ito in column form, A over B is equal to C over B. That AD is the extremes while BC are the means. AD are the extremes while BC are the means. So, it is just like we are applying also the fundamental law of proportion when we are solving for the unknown variable in a given proportion. So, pwedeng hindi mo na siya isulat in column form in order for you to apply fundamental law of proportion. Pwede naka-fraction form na lang siya. All you have to do is to apply the cross multiplication. It is the same way that we are applying the fundamental law of proportion. So aside from cross multiplication, the next is what we call property on proportion is the inversion. So, paano naman yung inversion? So, again, if A over B, if A over B is equal to C over D, then B over A is equal to D over C. So, anong nangyari? If we're going to look at yung first given natin, if A over B is equal to C over D, it becomes B over A is equal to D over C. So, ang nangyari, pinagpalit lang natin yung position ng numerator and denominator. Then, even if we do that, still the two ratios are equal. So they are still said to be as proportion. Diba sinabi nga natin kanina, pag sinabing proportion, yung dalawang ratios na given are should be equal for them to say that the given proportion is really a proportion. So with the application of inversion, that is by simply interchanging the position of the numerator and the denominator, still nothing happens with anong nangyari na nag-iba yung given ratio natin. But even if we apply inversion, the two ratios are still equal. So ganun pa rin yung mangyayari, equal pa rin yung given proportion. That is with the application of inversion, interchanging the position of numerator and denominator. Next, the third one is the alternation. So paano naman yung alternation? So again, if A over B is equal to C over D, then A over C is equal to B over D. Again, A over C is equal to B over D. Ano nangyari? Yung magkatapat sa numerator forms a ratio. Then yung magkatapat sa denominator forms another ratio. Then it forms proportion. So even if we do that, even if we do alternation property, still the two ratios are equal. Magiging equal pa rin yung two ratios. Let's take for example, gawin natin, 1/2, 3 over 6. 1/2 yung A over B, 3 over 6 to. So magiging 1/3 and 2 over 6. And 2 over 6, when you simplify it, is also the same as 1/3. So even if we apply alternation property on proportion, still the two ratios are equal. So meron pa rin tayong matatawag na proportion. Next, aside from alternation, we do have the addition and subtraction property on proportion. So it states that if A over B is equal to C over D, then kapag addition yun, A plus B over B is equal to C plus D over D. Kapag subtraction, A minus B over B is equal to C minus D over D. Anong ginawa? Inadd yung value ng numerator and denominator, then divide it with the denominator. Ganun din yung ginawa sa kabila. Inadd yung numerator and denominator, then divide by the denominator. So that's also what you're going to do kapag minus. Ma-minus naman yung numerator denominator, then divide it by the denominator. Same with C over D. So even if you will do addition and subtraction property on proportion, still the two ratios will become equal. Magiging equal pa rin sila. So kahit i-apply mo lahat yan, still yung magiging ratios natin are equal. Kaya nga siya tinawag as properties on proportion that even if we apply those properties, magiging proportion pa rin yung given two ratios natin. So that's about addition and subtraction property on proportion. Next. So we do have here equal ratios proportion. Para naman equal ratios proportion, sabi ito, if A over B is equal to C over D, then A plus C over B plus D is equal to A over B. Paano ginawa? We added both numerator as the numerator of the first ratio, then we added both denominators as the denominator of the first ratio. And it will be equal to the first ratio given. So kahit gawin natin yung ganun, kahit gawin natin equal ratios proportion, still, so magkakaroon tayo ng proportion. Magiging equal pa rin yung two ratios natin. So yun yung pinapakita sa atin ng different properties of proportion. That even if we apply these properties, still the two ratios will become equal. So what's next? Next is what we call mean proportion. So paano naman yung mean proportion? So sabi, if A over B is equal to B over D, so nagbago lang tayo, if A over B is equal to B over D, then magkakaroon tayo with the application of cross multiplication kanina, come up with B times B, which is B squared, is equal to A times D, which is AD. So since we want to find out for the measure of B here, all you have to do is to find the measure, to find the square root of both sides. Pag ginawa natin yon, magiging B na lang, which is equal to the square root of AD. So this formula na mabuform natin dito, ayun yung kakailanganin natin in order for us to find for the mean proportion. So later on, through example, malalaman natin kung paano kinukuha ba yung mean proportion. So basically, yung AD that we are pertaining to here, these are the two numbers given. Then, the B here is what we call as the mean proportion. So later, through examples, malalaman natin yan. So all in all, we do have these properties of proportion that can help us in order for us to answer problems which involves proportion. So, paano natin gagawin yan? So let's try examples. Let's try the two examples. So let's have examples here. So letter A, we are going to simplify these given examples. So number 1, 5 inches to 25 feet. So we are just going to simplify this given ratio. 5 inches to 25 feet. So if we're going to look at the given, they do have different unit of measurement. So when you say ratio, dapat they do, it's not like only that meron tayong given fraction. Dapat the fraction given are similar in terms of unit of measurement. So when it comes to the example number 1, we have 5 inches and 25 feet. So magkaiba sila ng unit of measurement. So we can simplify it by making both quantities with the same unit of measurement. So paano? Hindi naman natin siyang pwede i-convert yung 5 inches to feet. It's because it's less than 1 feet. 1 foot. It's less than 1 foot. Instead, let us convert 25 feet to inches. So ilang bang inches meron sa 1 foot? So meron tayong 12 inches in 1 foot. So kung may 12 inches in 1 foot, ilan sa 10 feet? Meron tayong 120 inches. Sa 20, sa another 10 is another 120. So we do have 240 inches. Then 5 feet. how many inches? We do have 60 inches. So we do, all in all, we do have 300 inches. 120 plus 120 plus 60. So we do have 300 inches. So let us just rewrite it na magkakaroon sila ng same unit of measurement. So it will be the same as 5 inches to 300 inches. So it's not just as simple as we just have to simplify it or getting the lowest term of it as 1 over 5. Because it involves unit of measurement. Kapag walang unit of measurement yan, so we can just simplify it as 1 over 5. But since it involves unit of measurement, and as you can see, they do have different unit of measurement. So, hindi kaagad natin siya mas-simplify as simple kung paano natin siya naisip at first. So, gagawin natin is to transform it into an expression, expression wherein their unit of measurements are the same. So we converted it in terms of inches. So basically, in 25 feet, you convert it into inches, which is equal to 300 inches. So ito ngayon, pagbabasihan natin in simplifying it or getting the lowest term of it. So mas madali kasi i-simplify yan if we're going to write it in fraction form. So, 5 inches to 300 inches is the same as 5 over 300. Pwede na hindi natin ilagay yung inches because they do have the same unit of measurement already. So, 5 over 300, when simplify, so both are divisible by 5. So, we can come up with the final answer as 1 over 60. So, the simplified form of 5 inches to 25 feet is equal to 1 over 60. So always remember na dapat when you simplify a given ratio, you have to make sure that the two quantities are in the same unit of measurement. So did you get example number 1? So if not yet, let's have another example. Let's have example number 2. Example number 2, we do have 15 meters to 3 kilometers. So 15 meters to 3 kilometers. Paano ba natin i-simplify yan? Again, as you can see, they do have different unit of measurement. Diba? So you just have to apply what we have applied on example number 1 also. 15 meters is less than 1 kilometer. So instead of converting it into kilometers, let's convert na lang 3 kilometers in terms of meters. Ilang meters ba ang meron sa 1 kilometer? So there are 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer. So, ibig sabihin, kung 3 kilometers yon, kung every kilometer is equivalent to 1,000 meters, so meron tayong 3,000 meters. So, it can be written as 15 meters to 3,000 meters. Then, write it in fraction form. So, magkakaroon tayo ng 15 over 3,000. Then, let's do the lowest term of it. Let's find the lowest term of it. Both numerator and denominator are divisible by 15. So, 15 divided by 15, that would be 1. Then 3,000 divided by 15 is how many? That will come up with 200. So, that will come up with the final answer as 1 over 200. So, when we simplify 15 meters to 3 kilometers, it will be equal to 1 over 200. So did you get example number 2? So let's try another. So number 3, number 3, simplify 120 minutes to 6 hours. 120 minutes to 6 hours. So magkaibalot ang unit of measurement. So dapat pagparehasin muna natin siya bago natin siya i-lowest term when we write it in fraction form. So both unit of measurement are exact. Pwede naman natin i-convert yung 120 minutes into hours or pwede convert natin yung hours in terms of minutes. Pwedeng ganon. So pipiliin mo lang distance, ano yung mas madali? Siyempre mas madali since exact naman yung 120 minutes in terms of hours na di ba, every 1 hour is equivalent to 60 minutes. So since 120 minutes yun, ibig sabihin meron tayong 2 hours there. So convert natin 120 minutes in terms of hours, so magkakaroon tayo ng 2 hours to 6 R's. So they are now on the same unit of measurement. So same din naman makukuha nating simplified form even if we convert 6 hours in terms of minutes. Yun nga lang, mas malaking number, so may encounter natin than converting 120 minutes in terms of hours. Hindi kasi natin pwedeng gawin yon on the first two examples because they are not exactly, or they are both one quantity are less than the other quantity, the other unit. So that's why iba yung ginawa natin in the first two examples. So this time, since exact naman, you want 20 minutes in terms of hours, so equivalent ay 2 hours, so we can use that. So 2 hours to 6 hours. In that way, by writing it in fraction form, meron tayong 2 over 6. So easily you can simplify it as 1/3. So number 3, the correct answer is 1/3. When we simplify 120 minutes to 6 hours. Nakuha yun. Not yet. Let's try the last example here. So 35 years to 2 decades. Simplify 35 years to 2 decades. Magkaiba ulit sila ng unit of measurement. So, gagawin natin, pagparehasin natin. So 35 years, hindi siya exact na in terms of decades. Kasi pag sinabi natin decades, that's equivalent, decade is equivalent to 10 years. So, hindi exact yung 35 years para magkaroon tayo ng parang it's just like 3.5 decades lang yun eh. Mas maganda kung exact yun. So instead, convert na lang natin yung decades in terms of years. Ilan ba yung 2 decades in terms of years? 1 decade is equivalent to 10 years. That will be 20 years. So pag kinonvert natin siya in terms of years, magiging ganito, 35 years to 20 years. So from there, write natin in fraction form, come up with 35 over 20. Then, get the lowest term of the given fraction here. So both are divisible by 5. So we can come out with a simplified form as 7 over 4. So when we simplify 35 years to 2 decades, that would be equivalent to 7 over 4. That's how we simplify ratio. Any questions? So let's continue. This time, let's give examples on letter B, finding the value of x, which is here we are going to apply a proportion. We're going to apply on how are we going to solve proportion. So find the value of x. Let's have example number 1. So x over 5 is equal to 21 over 35. So we do have here a given proportion. So ang goal natin is to find for the value of the variable x wherein masasabi natin na proportion yung dalawang ratio na yan. Again, di ba sinabi natin na when we say proportion, dapat magiging equal yung dalawang ratios na yun. So ano yung value ng x to make these two ratios equal? So anong gagawin natin? So pwedeng i-apply natin yung tawag nating fundamental law of proportion. Or we can apply yung tinatawag nating cross multiplication. So, let's try to solve for x here. So, cross multiplication tayo. X times 35, we do have 35x. Then 5 times 21 is equal to 105. Then from there, since we want to solve for the value of x, so since x is still accompanied by 35 there, so we still have to divide both sides of the equation by 35. So cancel now the 35, x will be left, then 105 is exactly divisible by 35. So 105 divided by 35, so we'll come up with the value of x which is equal to 3. So 3 yung value ng x that will make this proportion or that will make these two ratios equal for us to say that they are proportion. So kung 3 over 5 yon, dapat yung 21 over 5, pag nilowest term natin, is also the same as 3 over 5. Tama ba? 21 and 35 are both divisible by 7. So 21 divided by 7, that would be 3. 35 divided by 7 is equal to 5. So that's also the same as 3 over 5. So ibig sabihin, the right value for x is really 3 because it will make the two ratios equal. So that's how we solve for the value of the variable in a given proportion. So did you get example number 1? So if not yet, let's try another example. So let's have example number 2. So the given is 2/3 is equal to 8 over x plus 5. Just like what we did on example number 1, let's simply apply cross multiplication. So kung na-apply natin yan, magiging ganito. Magiging 2x plus 10 is equal to 24. Paano naging ganon? Ito yun, we multiply this. So since binomial to, we apply distributive property. So 2 times x, we do have 2x plus 2 times 5, we come up with 10, which is equal to 8 times 3, 24. Then move lang natin yung 10 to the right side of the equation. It will become 2x is equal to 24 minus 10. Then simplify 24 minus 10 will come up with 2x is equal to 14. Then since we want to solve for x, so let's divide first 2x is equal to 14. Both sides of it, let's divide it by 2 to solve for x. Cancel the 2 there, x will be left, then 14 divided by 2. Therefore, the answer is x is equal to 7. So that's how we answer example number 2. So we solve it by applying cross multiplication, or the same way we are applying the fundamental law of proportion. So nakuha example number 2. So let's try another example. Let's have number 3 here. Number 3, the given is 9 over 2x is equal to 5 over 20. So ganun din, let's apply cross multiplication. Pag ganyang cross multiplication i-apply natin, pwede naman you have to multiply it na mauuna yung may variable. So, kasi i-arrange natin siya sa right way wherein the variable is on the left side of the equation. Mas maganda kung naka-arrange siya ng ganon. So, in the case of number 3, unahin natin i-multiply yung 5 times 2x. So, magkakaroon tayo ng 10x is equal to 9 times 20, which is equal to 180. Then from there, since we want to solve for the value of x, let's divide both sides of the equation by 10. So cancel the 10 there, then x will be left, then 180 divided by 10 is equal to 18. So for number 3, the value of x is equal to 18. Did you get example number 3? So let's try this last example for finding the value of x in a given proportion. So number 4, the given is x over 6 is equal to x minus 3 over all over 4. So same way, parehas may variable on both sides of the equation. Pero ano yung uunahin mo i-multiply when you apply cross multiplication? Siyempre, tignan mo muna, ano yung mas malaki makukuha mo na x when you do cross multiplication. Siyempre, mas malaki kapag 6 ang uunahin mo. So you are going to cross multiply it wherein mauuna no, i-cross multiply ito. Pwede naman kahit ano mauna. Ang purpose nga lang natin, that's why we are doing that, is for us to come up with the equation which is written in the right form. Na hindi na natin problemahin na magkakaroon tayo ng answer na negative value, negative numerical coefficient of x. So iniiwasan na natin yun so that iniisip pa lang natin when we solve a given proportion na kung ano na agad yung mas malaki so that when we simplify it, positive numerical coefficient ng x pa rin ang mai-encounter natin. Just like what we are going to do on number 4. So unahin natin i-multiply yung 6 and x minus 3. So magkakaroon tayo ng 6x minus 18 is equal to 4x. Paano nangyari yun? That's 6 times x, that would be 6x minus 6 times 3, that would be 18. So it's equal to x times 4, which is 4x. So this time, simplify by moving 4x to the left side of the equation. So and moving 18 to the right side. So magiging 6x minus 4x is equal to 18. 6x minus 4x, that would be 2x is equal to 18. So since we want to find for the value of x, let's divide both sides of the equation by 2. So by doing that, x will be left, then 80 divided by 2 is equal to 9. So for number 4, the correct answer or the value of x is equal to 9. So if you are going to substitute these values of x in the given equation natin or the given proportion, the two ratios will become equal. So that's how we solve for the value of the unknown variable in a given portion. Question on that. So if na, let's proceed to the third. So examples on finding the mean proportion. Natandaan yung kanina. So yung formula na form natin in mean proportion. So yung formula na yon, yun yung mean proportion is equal to the square root of AD. Pinalitan lang natin yung D, B. Diba B is equal to square root of AD yon. So MP, ano lang natin to just to say that we are pertaining to the mean proportion. Abbreviate lang natin yung mean proportion. So mean proportion MP is equal to the square root of AD. So that's the formula that you are going to use in order for you to find for the mean proportion. What is AD that we are pertaining to here? Ayun yung given numbers natin in finding the mean proportion. So the two given numbers. So it's just like where you are going to find the mean proportion of the two numbers. So you are just going to apply this formula, and kahit ano yung mauna sa kanila do sa given two numbers natin. It's the same way that since AD yon, that AD are the two numbers that we are that two numbers given in finding the mean proportion. Let's take for example number 1. So number 1, the given is find the mean proportion of 2 and 8. Find the mean proportion of 2 and 8. So paano gagawin natin? Using the formula, and AD stands for the two numbers, so ito yung numbers na yon, just simply substitute the two numbers on the formula. So we come up with the square root of 2 times 8. Ito yung dalawang numbers. Ito yung AD. So 2 times 8, the square root of 2 times 8, and 2 times 8 is equal to the square root of 16. Since 16 is a perfect square, so we can come up now with the exact value of it. So the square root of 16 is equal to 4. So for number 1, if we are going to find for the mean proportion of 2 and 8, it will be equal to 4. So that's how we find the mean proportion. Again, that is just by simply applying the formula for finding the mean proportion, which is equal to the square root of AD. Any question? Let's try another. So find the mean proportion of 36 and 100. So let's apply again the formula by substituting 36 and 100 in place of AD. So we come up with the square root of 36 times 100. So ang ginawa natin on the first example, we multiply the 2 to come up with the answer of 16. So pwede rin natin gawin yon on example number 2. But if you're going to look at the two numbers that we are multiplying here, both of them are perfect squares. So, mas madali if we're going to get the root of that perfect squares than multiplying the two and find the square root of it. So, kasi in the first two examples, in the first example that we had, both numbers are non-perfect squares. So, that's why we multiply the two. But in the case of number 2, both numbers are perfect squares. So, pwede natin gawin getting the square root of both numbers right away. So, what would be the square root of 36? That would be 6. What would be the square root of 100? That would be 10. So, magkakaroon lang tayo ng 6 times 10. We get the root of the two numbers because it's the square root of the two numbers. So, we get the root of the two numbers because it so happened that the two numbers are perfect squares. So 6 times 10 now, it will be equal to 60. So sa madaling salita, if you are going to find the mean proportion of 36 and 100, it will be equal to 60. Kuha yun. Next, find the mean proportion of 4 and 45. So let's apply the formula. It will be equal to 4 times 9 times 5. So bakit ganun yung nangyari? So in the two numbers that we are getting the mean proportion, 4 is the perfect square, but 45 is not. But 45 has factors wherein one of its factor is a perfect square, and that is 9 times 5. That's why right away, we factor it. So that we can find the root of those perfect squares. For perfect square yung 4, perfect square din yung 9. The square root of 4 is 2, while the square root of 9 is 3. So magiging ganito. Then since 5 is not a perfect square and there are no factors of 5 other than 1 which are perfect square, so that 5 will stay inside the square root sign. So kasama pa rin yung square root sign na yun. Kinuha lang natin yung root of the perfect square in here. So square root of 4 is 2, square root of 9 is 3. Then lalabas na yung root nun, then may a1 yung 5 inside the square root sign. Then simplify that. 2 times 3 is 6. Then copy square root of 5 so that will come up with the answer as 6 square root of 5 as the mean proportion of 4 and 45. That's how we answer example number 2. May question ba so far? So if none, let's have this last example for letter C. So find the mean proportion of 25 and 75. Katulad yan yung example number 3. 25 is a perfect square. I-analyze mo kaagad eh. But 75 is not, but 75 has factors wherein one of its factor is a perfect square. So pwede na kaagad natin i-factor yun when we apply the formula for finding the mean proportion. So we'll come up with 25 times 25 times 3. So the right factors for 75 should be 25 times 3, wherein one of its factors is a perfect square. Then, find the root of those perfect square. Parehas perfect square yung 25, di ba? So, square root of 25 ay 5. Another 25, square root of it is also 5. Then, 3 will be left inside the square root sign. So, simplify. Meron tayong 5 times 5, which is equal to 25. Then, 3 will be attached to that 25. So, it will become, so the final answer will be 25 square root of 3. So that's how we answer example number 4, which is about finding the mean proportion of 25 and 75, which is equal to 25 over 3. Any questions? So hopefully, this time you know already on how to simplify ratio. Second, you know already on how to find the value of the variable in a given proportion. And third, you know already on how to find the mean proportion of the two numbers. So if there are no more questions, that would be all for today. Goodbye, class!